at the time had never came outside of Japan, at least not until, you know, like back in 1995. There was a game called Pocket Monsters Green and Pocket Monsters Red. Now, Green came out first, but then Red came out later on. And then, but the international releases of Pokemon Gen 1 are, it depends on the version you play, it depends on the region, depends on the language. It really just, there are some minor updates here and there, but depending on what year it was released, it wouldn't really be the same. But at the same time, though, from what I understand, the Missingno glitch has been there ever since the very beginning. So it's at least in this case, this is found in all the versions of the game. So if you didn't already know, Pokemon was originally supposed to come out in 1990 for the Game Boy, or rather the Super Game Boy in Japan. I don't know like what the difference on that is, but what had happened was it got scrapped for a while, and it would be until 5 years later that it would come out for the Game Boy. But what ended up happening though was there were, like, one of the original ideas from Pokemon was that it had like all these Betamons and all that, and like basically a bunch of beta designs, and they also had, there was it was supposed to be called Capsule Monsters, but it was actually called Kapu Monsters, or whatever it would be in Japanese like that. But anyways, so when Pokemon was originally coming out, 190 Pokemon were originally planned. Now, some of these Pokemon were obviously, most of them were the 151. You can find the ones online. But what ended up happening was 39 of these Pokemon, it's debatable like which ones were scrapped, because some of them were actually reused in Gen 2, but some of them were actually put off to the side, and like it would be until like years later that they would come back. So it really depends on what Pokemon we're talking about. But anyways, there was 190 of them at least that were planned for the first generation of the game. And so what ended up happening was some of these Pokemon actually were in Gen 2 because they, you know, it makes sense because Gen 1. So if you remember, so some of the Missingno Pokemon, the other 39, are actually Pokemon that belong in Gen 2. The reason why they're glitchy tiles and all that, because they don't have a proper sprite animation, and therefore what ends up happening is the game doesn't know how to recognize it, even though it's still in the game's coding. However, though, if they were to transfer it to Generation 2, because believe it or not, this is how they actually solve this mystery, you would be surprised that, you know, if you caught like a glitchy Missingno and were able to trade it somehow with a time capsule in Gen 2, it would actually come out as another Pokemon. Or you could just directly trade it, if I remember correctly. It's interesting to think, though, because those Pokemon were what really, you know, people were able to somehow make sense in this, and they were able to say, oh, that proves that, like Lugia, Entei, Suicune, Raikou, and like some of the legendaries, for example, Scizor, Shuckle. Some of these Pokemon were like, it makes sense because they were from Gen 2, and it would make sense that Gen 1 was really supposed to be just Gen 1, but they wanted to put so much stuff into those games. Really the only thing that Nintendo could do if they made a sequel, because that's what ended up happening when Gen 2 came out, and believe it or not, there was even more beta Pokemon in Gen 2, and some of them were scrapped, and some of them were just redesigns of every single Pokemon. For example, like Leafeon and wouldn't be reused until like Gen 4, and like it's just really interesting to think like how many ideas come and go, and then when people actually have proof it existed, you know, who does it belong to, and was it just a scrapped idea, or was it just recycled into something else, you know? Because it's really interesting. I think that they actually have the list on the internet of like the original 190 Pokemon, and it's actually in chronological order, like when they were drawn and all that. And it's really interesting to think that, you know, you can really see some of the Pokemon that they never were going to have, and what their purpose might have been. So it kind of makes you wonder like how different Pokemon really would have been if it would have went that route. But the way I look at it, all the Pokemon right now, at least what the game designers wanted to put in the game, they did make that. So at least most of the stuff that all the beta designs were mostly supposed to be what it was, like what they wanted it to be in the end once they redid everything. So all the Pokemon that they originally selected and redesigned and gave them their unique details and all that, it's in there, you know. So we just basically had to figure out like what's been scrapped and try to make sense of those mysteries if we can. And this hopefully kind of can shed some light on the whole Missingno thing, because that's why, you know, they're glitchy tiles, and that's why they're glitchy. You know? Yeah, I mean, you know, why have all that time go to waste then if you're gonna have all these ideas? So I mean, it makes sense, you know. So hopefully in the end, like, this kind of explains a little bit about what it's about, because really all the original 190 Pokemon, you can find it on the internet now, like who they were, because it's been proven by now.